how cinch size, shape, and materials can affect the saddle fit. Most riders think that cinches are just something that keeps the saddle on, but it's actually a major part of how the saddle fits and how in the saddle fitting system. The wrong cinch can pull your saddle backwards or forward, make the saddle tip, restrict the shoulders, cause girth gals or rubs, interfere with elbow movement, change the angle of the rigging, create pressure points that alter balance, and cause behavioral issues like ear pinning or bucking. So here's a deep dive that we go into. Cinch length, too short versus too long. So properly fitted cinch should buckle near the horse's elbow or the midline, typically between the second and third hole from the end of the latigo on each side. Now this depends what kind of latigo and depends if you use an off billet versus a complete latigo versus a half breed on the offside. If the cinch is too short, the buckles will sit too low, and this can cause the latigos to pull the saddle down and forward. It can jam the saddle onto the scapula, can create elbow interference, increase pressure at the bottom of the rigging, and very common with thick felt pads. It can cause cinch galls in front of the elbow, and short cinches will often make the saddle creep forward and then feel tighter than it actually is. If the cinch is too long, the buckles sit up too high near the barrel. It can force the rigging to pull up instead of in. It can cause the saddle to roll. It can make the horse feel pinched behind the elbow. It can collapse the front of the saddle downward, often makes the saddle feel unstable. And overly long cinches can trap the saddle in a forward tipped position. The ideal cinch placement and length is going to be the buckle should sit 2 to 3 inches above the elbow. The billet or latigo strap should land roughly midway up the horse's barrel. The cinch should sit vertical when tight, not angled forward or backwards. If the cinch angles forward, the saddle is too far back. If it angles backward, the rigging is wrong for that horse or the cinch is too long. The cinch width and how it changes the saddle fit. This can directly affect the stability, the pressure distribution, forward pull on the saddle, comfort around the elbow, and how well the saddle stays in place. The typical 2 to 3 inch narrow roper or straight cinch, this is going to have a high pressure per square inch, can cause galls on sensitive horses. It allows for more forward movement of the saddle, less stability, not ideal for round or mutton withered horses. It's used more in showing or roping gear, but not for everyday training, and narrow cinches can increase forward pull of the saddle. Your 4 to 5 inch straight cinches, that's a pretty standard width, good for most average built horses. The balance between pressure distribution and freedom of movement does not significantly alter the saddle position unless too tight, and the width is more of a neutral starting point for most saddle fittings. So going back to the 2 to 3, it's really common if you notice on, say, a bareback pad that includes a cinch. That cinch usually isn't even really a cinch. It's typically just like a really big, long latigo that goes around the belly for some odd reason. And that is usually like the 2 to 3 inch, and that's it. Moving on to the 5 to 7 inch roper style cinches, which are going to be flare shaped. They're a more broad center disperse of the pressure, and they do that very well. They're great for round, wide, mutton withered, or draft type horses. They're going to help prevent the saddle from sliding forward. It's going to allow for more shoulder freedom when shaped correctly. Good for long rides and sensitive horses. And the roper style cinch often reduces the need to over tighten a saddle. These are by far my favorite shaped cinches. I find that this fits most of my stock horses very well, as that's what I typically ride is mostly stock horses, and very, very few I end up in a straight cinch. Most of them I do end up having in a roper style cinch because it does help distribute that weight and it helps to stabilize that saddle a lot better. The cinch materials and how they affect the saddle as well. Each material will grip or move or breathe differently. Mohair can be a single or double strand. It's typically the gold standard. It's very breathable. Does have some slight stretch, which allows for some comfort and security. Conforms to the horse's barrel. It does typically reduce the galling, and there's less of a need to over tighten. Mohair provides consistent contact and therefore improves stability. Alpaca, it's even softer than mohair, very breathable. It's expensive but excellent for sensitive horses, and it provides soft grip without heat buildup. I do not own a alpaca cinch, but I've had several mohairs. I really like those. Neoprene. They're very grippy, can help prevent sliding, but it can pull the saddle forward. It traps heat and sweat and can cause galls, especially in hot, humid climates. They can be easy to clean as long as there is no cracks. That is the key. If there's any sort of stitching that's loose, any cracks, then they become a pain in the butt to try and clean. They then therefore trap extra moisture. They don't dry out as well if they're those cracks, and that's where your fungus builds up. As far as causing galls and humidity, yes, yes, and yes. It traps the heat, traps the sweat, and therefore that's how you get your galls. Um, Maybe in colder places, or if you are only riding for a very short period of time, but living down here, southern Oklahoma, North Texas, it's not a good combination. I've seen way too many issues with this. They do not stretch, and so as a rider, you need to over tighten them more. And because you over tighten the neoprene cinches, it changes the saddle balance by pulling down on the front end. Felt or wool cinches, they tend to have good airflow. They tend to be comfortable. Some grip without sticking. They conform well to the barrel and they help distribute pressure but can stretch over time. I've had felt wool cinches, and they've also worked very well for what I needed them. They don't gall. Um, I've had good luck with them. I just don't have as many as I have the mohair. The fox wool or fleece cinches, they're soft but can hold moisture. Absolutely very true. If you're riding more than one horse, I highly suggest swapping out cinches. Same thing with the mohair. Just keep rotating out your cinches. It's better to have more cinches, put them on different horses, even label them if you need to, and let them dry before putting on another horse. It'll also help prevent any fungus. The wool or fleece cinches can slip and they can sometimes compress unevenly over time. They do tend to trap dirt, sweat, s- stickers, burrs, etc., which can cause rubs. They're not ideal for daily work or saddle fitting purposes. Um, I do have a couple of these. They work good if there's a horse that's really sensitive, but they can rub funny, and so I've had issues with that as well. Leather cinches, they're traditional but stiff until broken in. They have very low stretch, provide stability when conditioned properly, but they're not always ideal for very round horses. I do have a couple other cinches. I don't use them on a regular basis. Um, yeah, they're a little bit different. They take a lot more care, and I will say that it's just more common in the show ring versus everyday use. Cinch shape and its effect on movement. A straight cinch will have a neutral pull, good for upright or balanced horses. However, they may interfere with elbow on a thick barreled horse. They can cause forward to creep. This is more so common because, like, you see a really chunky horse, they just don't have a good heart girth or a heart girth area where that cinch will sit, and so they will tend to creep forward on that horse, which therefore interferes with their elbow and shoulder movement. A roper's type cinch, we already talked about this with the hourglass shape. They're wider in the middle and it's going to disperse the pressure. Narrow at the elbows, which avoids rubs and prevents saddle from slipping forward. They're great for round barrels, mutton withered, short backed horses, horses with elbow rub issues, and it's the most back friendly shape. A contoured cinch, curved to follow the horse's sternum and rib cage, reduces elbow interference, helps keep the cinch vertical. It's good for horses with forward girth groove, large shoulders, thick chest. Contoured cinch helps reducing the forward drag of the saddle as well. Cutaway or a shoulder relief cinches, extra curve near the elbow. It's going to prevent some pinch, allows for more stride and elbow freedom. Good for young horses, wide horses, horses with large elbow movement, and they can increase comfort dramatically. I've read and heard different things on these types of cinches. Some people claim they do, some people claim they don't. I personally I have two of them. I've played around with them. I do feel like it can help properly situate that saddle where it needs to fit, especially if you're trying to fit that cinch in that heart girth area, and maybe the rigging is a little misplaced and it's off. These do help that way. Um, I've had one mare that really liked the cinch. I've had others that just, they didn't really care. So do they help? I feel like they help some horses. I feel like maybe not so much other horses. It just honestly depends on that horse, on the saddle, um, the rigging of the saddle, and that sort of thing. How cinches affects saddle stability as far as forward creeping saddle, then you're likely to have the likely causes are going to be maybe the cinch is too narrow, the cinch might be too short, could be a neoprene cinch, full rigging position, the pad is too thick, the saddle placed too far forward, or the horse is in a downhill mutton withered. The fixes for this: use a roper or contoured cinch, shorten the pad thickness, switch to a 7/8 or 3/4 rigged saddle, or add a breast collar. It's a minor fix and it's not a primary fix. It's not going to guarantee that it helps. If your saddle is rolling side to side, causes can be cinches too long, cinches too narrow, slick cinch materials such as fleece, horses round bodied, or the latigos are too long. Try and get a shorter cinch, a mohair or wool cinch, roper shape, and properly tightened back cinch for stability. If the saddle tips forward or backward, tipping forward, the cinch is too short, cinch buckles too low, neoprene pulling down on the front, or the narrow cinch digging into the sternum. If tipping backward, the cinch is too long, straight cinch used on a forward girth groove, and the cinch slipping backward due to shape misplacement. And back cinches matter as well. A properly fitted back cinch is just as important. Should be snug, no more than 2 to 3 fingers gap, should not hang loose. It's going to prevent the saddle from a real lift and stabilize the back end of the saddle. It's essential for roping, trail riding, hills, and I always put it on young horses. I always put it on all of my horses because I do believe that we don't always know what that horse may or may not go on to do in its future. I've had horses come in or that I've bought that were not started with back cinches, and then you go to put one on, and it becomes a entertainment spectator sport. Some of those horses really take it personally, and they will go to bucking. Becomes a rodeo sport then instead of a riding sport. The back cinch should always connect to the front cinch with a hobble strap. A loose back cinch is very dangerous and can cause bucking when it hits the belly, or if they go to swat a fly and their back leg gets stuck. So Preferably, I like to keep even like where it says 2 to 3 inches gap. I like to be right against that belly. The cinch and rigging interaction is critical. Full rigging is plus a narrow cinch is going to have a forward saddled creep versus a 7/8 rigging and a roper cinch is most neutral and stable. 3/4 rigging and a straight cinch can pull the saddle slightly back. And understanding this interaction helps riders choose correct equipment for each horse and their build. Now, again, these riggings are meant for different shapes of backs, along with where it will sit properly on that horse. We do go into more of the rigging further on.